Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the International Student Connect's webinars on legal rights while employed in Canada. My name is Ingrid, and I will be the presenter of today's webinar. Thank you once again for joining us. Before we begin the webinar, I'd just like to do some housekeeping. If you have any questions, please use the raised hand sign to let us know that you can either hear us or you can't hear us, or you have a question. You may also type your question in the questions and answers dialog box that is outlined on the screen currently. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the International Student Connect project. This project was created to provide settlement support to international students and their families, and to assist them in integrating successfully if they decide to remain in Ontario after they've completed their studies. ISC is a partnership between colleges, universities, and community settlement agencies. The project is also funded by the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration. Due to various immigration policies as well as personal circumstances, international students have particular needs compared to the general newcomer population. So this project has been designed to help to provide services in healthcare, housing, and other additional supports for students and their families. The project is brought to you by Costi Immigrant Services, a community based multicultural agency that services new Canadians and their families throughout the Greater Toronto area. We do have 17 centers, and we serve about 40,000 new immigrants across the Greater Toronto area. And when we talk about serving immigrants, we're talking about immigrants from all over the world. Our agenda today will look at study and work permits, co-op or internship programs, the Employment Standards Act, work structure and compensation, overtime, lieu time, vacation, and statutory holidays. We'll also take a look at the lunch and coffee and rest breaks as we go along. So hopefully you will learn something that you don't already know from this webinar. So the first thing we want to take a look at is the study and work permits. Now, it is possible to work while you're here as a student under any of the Citizenship and Immigration Canada's work programs for students. International students are legally able to work in Ontario, and you may work under the following scenarios. You may work on campus. If you wish to work while you're in school, you can do that by choosing a job that is on campus. You may work off campus, or you may be working as a co-op or in an internship program. Now, you will need a work permit because a work permit is required. And that work permit is actually attached to your student permit. So you don't necessarily have to go and apply for a standalone work permit because it is attached to your student permit. Now, if you are a full-time student at a public post-secondary institution, a Canadian college or university, one of the colleges under the professional colleges in Quebec, a private Canadian post-secondary institution, or a private Canadian institution authorized by provincial statute to confer degrees. So again, you will have a work permit that is attached to your student permit if you are choosing to find a job. Now, you will need what is known as a social insurance number, and we often refer to them as SIN numbers. So you'll hear that terminology being tossed around quite frequently here in Canada. You must have one of the following conditions printed on your study permit in order for you to work. or to apply for the SIN number for an on-campus job. On your study permit, it should say, may accept employment on campus of the institution at which registered in full-time studies. Or it may also say, may accept employment on or off campus if meeting eligibility criteria as per R186, F, V, or W. You must cease working if you no longer meet these criteria. And without the above remarks, an amendment to your study permit must be submitted before you may apply for a social insurance number, or the SIN number for short. Hopefully that is pretty clear. If you have any questions, you may ask either now, or you can do so at the end of the webinar. Let's look at working on or off campus and some of the criteria that is surrounded by that. Now, eligible students with a valid study permit may acquire experience by working off campus. The eligibility criteria is that a valid study permit. You must have one. You must be a full-time student enrolled at a designated learning institution or post-secondary institution. You must be enrolled in a vocational program, secondary level in Quebec, and you must be enrolled in a professional training program. Now, hopefully that is pretty clear for you. At the end of the webinar, I will also provide you with a webinar summary that will give you a list of some websites that you'll be able to visit in order for you to gather more information on these various different criteria that you may fall under. Now, working off campus, if you meet the eligibility criteria for working while studying in Canada, the following will be applicable to you. You may work 20 hours per week. Some people are able to work full-time during the winter, summer, and spring breaks. So if you find yourself in this situation where you're actually able to work during the breaks, you're able to work full-time as well. To determine your eligibility, you may use the self-assessment tool, and that tool is located on the CIC's website at www.cic.gc.ca/English/study. And you can definitely find a lot of information on these websites. They're very helpful and very useful to you. So I suggest that if you are looking for additional information, please definitely visit these websites. Now we'll take a look at the co-op or the internship program at this point. If you do have any questions, once again, please do feel free to write it in the questions and answers box, and I'll be more than happy to respond. For some academic programs, work experience is part of the curriculum. To participate in a co-op or internship program, you must meet the eligibility criteria. This means that as a foreign student wishing to apply or to participate in a co-op or internship program, you must apply for a work permit as well as a study permit. And you must also meet the eligibility criteria. The eligibility criteria is as follows. You must have a valid study permit. The job must relate to the program of study that you're going to be taking part in Canada. The job must be part of your academic program, and you must have a referral letter from a responsible academic official. Co-op or internships cannot be more than 50% of the total program of study. So that means if you are working for, let's say, if you're going to go to school for, let's say, 6 months, your co-op cannot be 4 months out of that 6 months. It has to be a minimum, a maximum, I'm sorry, of 3 months. So hopefully that puts it into perspective for you. There are 3 steps to apply for the work permit. And this you can also find again at www.cic.gc.ca/English study. You must determine how to apply on paper or online, complete the application, and attach the necessary documents that you need to submit. Now, there are some packages online. So once you go to the website, you'll be able to download these packages and you're going to be able to complete them and send it in. The application form contains the instructions. Please definitely make sure that you read the instructions correctly and provide the required documents. If information or documents are missing, your application may be delayed. There's a document checklist in the application kit, and so use that document checklist, as well as you will be responsible for including the document checklist in your full application. Try to answer all your questions truthfully, because if you don't and immigration realizes that you have not responded to the questions truthfully, that could go against you and your application, and you definitely do not want that to happen, okay? Now we'll take a look at the Employment Standards Act. If you are going to find a job in Canada while you're studying, you absolutely do need to understand the Employment Standards Act. You need to know the rules surrounding your work and what are the responsibilities of both yourself and the employer. So, the Employment Standards Act 2000, and for short form, people will refer to it as the ISC, defines the rights and the responsibilities of employees and employers in Ontario. The ESA sets the standards for minimum wages. They determine public holidays. They determine what are legal hours of work, overtime pay, vacation time and pay, statutory holidays and statutory leaves. And they also set the standards for termination and severance entitlements. You may go to www.labor.gov.on.ca. This website will provide you with a wealth of information on this topic. Now, an employer who's covered by the ESA must have an employment standards poster published by the Ministry of Labor displayed somewhere in the workplace where employees are likely to see it. It must be posted in English and any majority language used in the workplace. So, Ontario is a province, and Canada is a country where it is bilingual. So we've got 2 official languages, English and French. However, if the workplace that you are working in, there is a vast majority of employees who speak, let's say, Mandarin, for example, or Urdu or Arabic, the ESA must be posted in that language, because the government actually does have these posters translated in various different languages on their website, so there's not a cost for it, and by law the employer must do so. Posters are available in English and French, as I said, and various other languages. Youth working in the following positions, among others, are covered under the ESA, so it does not matter whether you're working in retail, you are covered. If you work in the restaurants or hotels industry, construction and farming, domestic services, or if you are assigned by a temp agency. Regardless of what industry you are working in, we still do have coverage for you under the ESA Act. Let's take a look at work structure and the way that you are actually compensated. In Ontario, we talk about minimum wages, as I believe happens in many other countries. There are several minimum wage rates. So we've got a general minimum wage rate and a student minimum wage rate. So we'll take a look at those a little bit later. But first, let's look at what is considered a work week. A work week is a recurring period of 7 consecutive days selected by the employer for the purpose of scheduling work. Or, if the employer has not selected such a period, a recurring period of 7 consecutive days beginning on Sunday and ending on Saturday. You may go to www.labor.gov.on.ca and you will find additional information. This will be posted once again in the webinar summary that I will be emailing to you at the end of the webinar. What are minimum wages? Minimum wage is the lowest hourly wage employers can legally pay employees, whether they are full-time or part-time employees. Ontario has more than one minimum wage rate, a general minimum wage rate, and a student minimum wage rate. If you work less than 28 hours weekly, you will receive student minimum wages. If you work more than 28 hours weekly, you will receive the general minimum wages. Here we have put together a chart that can be found on the ministry's website. This chart shows the minimum wage rate as of October 2016. This is the most updated version that is posted on the website. The general minimum wage is $11.40 per hour. The student minimum wage is $10.70 per hour. For those who serve liquor, the minimum wage is $9.90. And for some of us who work in the hunting and fishing industry, those minimum wages are also different. There's $56.95 rate for working less than 5 consecutive hours in a day. And then it also increases as well. For homeowners' wage, this is people who do, they work perhaps as domestic helpers in different homes. They are paid $12.55 per hour. There are also those who work as word processors, telephone soliciting, and these are people who work customer service jobs. These jobs pay a little bit more, $12.55 per hour. Minimum wage provisions under the Employment Act. Students training in certain occupations, such as, but it's not limited to the list that we have here, architecture, law, professional engineering, medicine and optometry, secondary students completing work experience programs, students working under colleges, universities, approved programs. These students are also covered. There are exemptions to minimum wage entitlements in the ESA, and it depends, again, based on what provision has been made for you under the ESA. So we will provide you with the website, and please do visit that website so you can get firsthand information about these programs and the provisions. We'll now take a look at overtime, lieu time, vacation pay, and statutory holidays. These are very, very important. Overtime compensation is required when you work more than 44 hours in a week. You do become entitled under the ESA Act. So, overtime is at least 1.5 times your regular rate of pay for each hour of work over 44 hours a week. This means that if you earn $11.75 an hour, overtime would be calculated as $11.75 plus $5.87, which equals to $17.62 per each hour over the 44 hours per week. I hope that makes sense. If an employee and their employer agrees in writing that the employee can take 1.5 hours paid time off work for each hour of overtime worked, that is also possible. Employees are not automatically entitled to overtime pay when they work more than their regular work hours in a particular day. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Let's say, for example, you worked in any given day, you worked, let's take today, Tuesday, for example. You've worked today 9 hours. So if your work day is supposed to be 7.5 hours and you've now worked 9 hours, then that means that you have worked an extra couple of hours over the regular time that you're supposed to work. This, however, does not automatically mean that you must be paid overtime for the extra time that you've worked today. Overtime begins to accumulate when you go over the 44 hours in the work week. However, your employer may decide to pay you overtime for that particular day. So they're not legally bounded to do so, but they may choose to do so. There are employees who are entitled to daily overtime pay based on a written contract agreed upon between you and your employer. So again, this is not automatic. This happens based on different provisions that are made between yourself and your employer. Lieu time. What is lieu time? Well, some employers will agree to pay their employees in lieu time. So an employee and their employer can agree in writing that the employee will receive paid time off work instead of overtime pay. What does that mean? It means that if you've accumulated extra time of work, so let's say you were supposed to work 35 hours in a week, but you ended up working 45 hours in that week. Your employer and you can decide in writing that instead of the employer paying you overtime pay, they will give you the time off with pay. So you could take perhaps an additional 2 days off work that is paid, and that would be the lieu time that you have accumulated. Lieu time is sometimes called banked overtime hours. This means that you will be paid 1.5 hours of paid time off work for each overtime hour worked. So again, this will be free time that you're going to get, but you can get the time off. However, you will not get additional pay for that. You will just get your regular hourly pay, or if you're a salaried employee, you'll end up getting your regular salary pay. Under the ESA, the lieu time or banked hours must be taken within 3 months of the week in which the overtime was earned. Again, this is the provision that is made under the ESA. However, you and your employer could decide together how you're going to approach that. So it is quite possible that your employer may decide that, okay, you and your employer may decide that even though the ESA states that you should take it up to within 3 months, your employer and you could decide that, okay, you're going to save those hours. Perhaps you have a vacation coming up and you want to use the extra time, and your employer will allow you to do so. Vacation time and pay. There are 2 types of vacation entitlement. Vacation entitlement year, so a 12-month period where employees earn vacation. And then there's the standard vacation entitlement year, a recurring 12-month period beginning on the day you were hired. Okay? So employees are entitled to 2 weeks of vacation time after each 12-month vacation entitlement year. Ordinarily, a vacation entitlement year is a recurring 12-month period, beginning from the time that you were hired. So let's say you were hired in March. The vacation accumulation over those 12-month period would be from March 2016 to March 2017. Vacation pay must be at least 4% of your gross wages, excluding any vacation pay. So when we talk about your gross earnings, we're talking about what you have earned. It's the total amount you are paid before taxes have been removed from your pay. In fact, a person's take-home pay may be significantly less than their gross pay. So I hope, again, that that does make sense. And if you do need additional information, please do go to www.labor.gov.on.ca, where you'll find additional information on this. Statutory holidays. In Ontario, we've got 9 public holidays. There's New Year's Day, Canada Day, Family Day, Labor Day, Good Friday, Queen Victoria Day, Thanksgiving Day, and Christmas Day. Employers may sometimes give Easter Sunday or Monday or Remembrance Day as well. There are some employers who will allow you to take those days as holidays, but they are not legally required to do so. So please keep that in mind, that if you have a friend who was getting the time off, let's say, for example, they were getting Remembrance Day off, or they were getting, let's say, Easter Sunday or Monday, and you didn't get it, it doesn't mean that your employer is doing anything illegal. Under the Employment Standards Act, the employer is not legally entitled to give you this time off, okay? All right. Now, qualifying for public holidays, you must work your last scheduled shift before the holiday and your first scheduled shift after the holiday, okay? So now, what does that mean? There are people who will say, okay, so for example, Monday for us was a holiday here in Canada. It was Victoria Day. And there are people who say, all right, well, Victoria Day is Monday, and I'm going to take an extra long weekend. So I'm not going to schedule the time off. I'm just going to call in sick, or I'm just going to call in and say I'm not going to go to work today. Well, while your employer is required to pay you for Queen Victoria Day, if you decided that you were going to take an extra day that was not scheduled, whether it's before Victoria Day, so let's say your last scheduled shift was on Thursday of last week, and your next scheduled shift is Tuesday, today, after Victoria Day, and you didn't show up for work on Thursday, it means that your employer does not legally have to pay you for Victoria Day. They don't have to pay you for Monday. So, like we said, the first and the last day before and after the holiday does not have to be the day immediately following the holiday or coming prior to the holiday. It means it's the last day of your scheduled shift. Okay, so please do keep that in mind. I have had situations where people have asked about, why wasn't I paid for the holiday? And I went to work on Wednesday, but I didn't go on Thursday, and the holiday fell on Monday. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't have gotten paid. Yes, that is the way that it works legally. You must show up for your last scheduled shift and your first scheduled shift after the holidays. Hope that makes sense. Now, let's take a look at lunch and coffee breaks. These seem to be a sticking point for quite a bit of people. People tend to not recognize or understand. Sometimes we've got people who they get a 15-minute break and they think that, I can take 20 minutes or I can take half an hour, and your employer should not have any authority to say anything about it. Well, let's just get into that right now. Okay, so eating breaks. You may not work longer than 5 hours without being given a half an hour, that means a 30-minute break, for eating. So if you've got an 8-hour shift, your employer can decide that they will not allow you to take a break before the 5 hours. Some employers will not follow this. They will say, okay, so you are working part-time, you've got a 5-hour shift today, you're going to get a 15-minute break between those 5 hours. They don't have to legally do that. What they legally have to do is ensure that you do get a break after you've worked for 5 hours consecutive, 5 consecutive hours. You can agree to split the 30-minute break into two 15-minute breaks. So sometimes employers will and employees will decide that they're going to take two 15 minutes as opposed to one half an hour. Me, I prefer to have that full half an hour. I feel like I'm a little bit more rested. But again, that also comes back to the employer and the decision that the employer makes regarding the break and the break schedule. Meal breaks are by law unpaid. An employer may, however, decide to pay you for your meal breaks. So if your employer decides that they're going to pay you for your meal breaks, be thankful for it. They are not legally required to do so. Employers do not have to give you a coffee break or any other kind of break except for eating. So they are required by law to provide you with a eating break. They don't have to give coffee breaks or smoke breaks. And there are employers who are right here in Ontario, Canada. In many, many cases, the employers allow those people who have a smoking habit to get a smoke break. Outside of their 15-minute break, some employers allow people who they are observing their religious faith, their beliefs. They are allowed to get a prayer break. These things, however, are not something that the employer must do. They do not legally have to give you any other break except your eating breaks. So please do keep that in mind and be thankful to the employers who observe that it is important for their employees to be happy, and one of the best ways to do so is to ensure that they do get adequate breaks so that they can rest and come back to work, fully amped up. You've eaten, even if you haven't had something to eat and you just really needed to get off your feet for a bit. Be thankful for those employers who are willing to do that. Termination of employment. There are a few terms that are used to describe when an employee loses their job or their services are no longer required. You'll hear people talk about someone getting let go, perhaps someone being dismissed, fired, or permanently laid off. Under the Employment Standards Act, a person's employment is terminated if the employer dismisses or stops employing the employee, including where an employee is no longer employed due to the bankruptcy or insolvency of the employer. There are a few different types of dismissal. So there's a constructive dismissal, where an employee and the employer they perhaps have come to a crossroad and the employee decides that they're going to resign, and they provide the employer with a reasonable time frame in terms of when they will be leaving. So they've given the employer adequate notice. Then we have termination notice or pay. Let's take a look at that. In most cases, when an employer ends the employment of an employee who has been continuously employed for 3 months, the employer must provide the employee with either written notice of termination, termination pay, or a combination. The ESA does not require an employer to give an employee a reason why his or her employment is being terminated. There are, however, some situations where an employer cannot terminate the employee. So, termination pay may be required depending on why you're getting terminated. And again, the ESA does not require the employer to provide written termination notice. Some employers will do that depending on the type of business they operate and depending on their standards of, how they would like their business to proceed. So absolutely, these are things that you should definitely take a look at. You can go to www.labor.gov.on.ca and find some additional information. We have some available resources for you on our website, the International Student Connects website. We've got group workshops, one-on-one sessions that you can attend. If you are inside of Canada already, as you know, you can attend one of our webinars. We have a handbook, the International Student Guide, can be found as well on our website. They're fact sheets, and we've got a transition plan. This is what the International Student Connects website looks like. So you'll see the various tabs. We've got Studying in Canada, Let's Connect, resources on, after you've graduated, a transition plan, and then there's some information about us. You can attend our webinars by going to our website and selecting the webinar that you would like to attend. Here we have some graphics of our handbook and our fact sheets. The transition plan is a tool that helps you to keep track of the tasks and set schedules and deadlines for your immigration. Let's say, for example, you've come into Canada as an international student, but your end goal, or you've studied here and you recognize that you do like the way that the people treat you here in Canada, and you've decided that, okay, I want to stay here. This transition plan will help you in your quest to become a permanent resident of Canada. So definitely check out the transition plan on our website. And then we've got a list of our upcoming webinars. We've got some webinars in education and training for both international students, your spouses, and your children. Housing, we look at the best ways to find rental housing, or even if you decide to purchase a property here in Ontario as an international student, employment. So some of the best ways to gain employment here in Canada, immigration pathways, how you will transition from a student to a permanent resident. We'll look at money and personal finances as well. And we have additional webinars in terms of banking and credit, how to build your credit as a student so that it will transfer to you when you become an international student. If you have any questions about this webinar, please feel free to give me a call. You may call us at 1-844-871-4567, or you may contact us at ISC@costi.org. We want to thank you for joining us today in our webinar. If you have any questions and you'd like to ask us those questions now, please do feel free to do so. I will remain online so that you can ask your questions. And if you feel more comfortable, you can send us an email and we'll definitely respond to those questions. Thank you once again for joining us for our webinar today. I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you.